Welcome everybody. I thought it would be good for you guys to see what my settings are for VR within iRacing. I know I've done it previously in a video at the start of a race, but I thought a dedicated video on it would be good for you guys. You can use it as a base, know what I use, settings wise. I will go into as much detail as I can within my own ability of what I understand. These settings are based around achieving the maximum frame rate that the Oculus Rift S can achieve, which is 80 FPS, with a nice combination of good textures, good graphical detail, and also that allows me to record at the same time. So some of these settings, if I wasn't recording, I would be able to crank them up a little bit more, but because I need that bit of usage to record the image, I can't quite have everything up to max detail. Otherwise I'd suffer a severe FPS drop. But yeah, guys, if you like this video, remember to hit that like and to subscribe for future content. An ACC settings video is going to be following this as well. But yeah, let's head into it. Let's start with the resolution. Now, I am not recording this in VR, so this is on my monitor. Now, the resolution, is currently set at full screen with a resolution of 2560 by 1440, which is what my monitor is. It's an Ultra HD monitor. Now, this I generally leave as well when I have got the VR on. I leave this setting as it is. It doesn't change. Always have it as full screen because the Oculus Rift S can achieve 1440p per eye anyway, or overall resolution. So that's what I use. And then the UI zoom is just how big it is. Generally within VR, I like to have it at 80. That looks quite small on the monitor, but in VR, that's a suitable distance away. Anything above kind of that, personally, it's just whoa in my face. So multi-GPU support is how many GPUs you've got. So of course, if you've got 2, you'd set that to 2, and 4, I don't know who has 4. You must be rich if you've got 4 GPUs. So I have 1. Likewise, I only have 1 monitor. Alignment doesn't really matter. Gamma and brightness is for the HDR rendering, which we will get to. I don't have that ticked. Now, this is what you want for VR. You want to make sure you have SPS ticked. Now, as you can see at the bottom, you can't quite see what it says, but it states for VR stereo rendering, enables GPU-based single pass stereo, SPS. So yeah, that's just a setting that it's basically your VR setting to make sure that the image that is displayed is being correctly displayed within your VR. Multi-projection is for multiple screens, 3 screens. And SMP, I'm not really entirely sure what that is. Now, as we move down, this is where all the fun begins. This is where the real settings are. Now, as a basic, they do have a slider bar that will change as you change these individual settings anyway, but you can just drag that up and down to determine what you want. So if you want max quality or if you want max frame rate, and it will automatically alter all of these settings below to achieve what you want. So if you want a max frame rate, everything down here will more than likely, these will all untick, and then everything will be set to low because then your GPU is not using as much memory and it's not much power. Max quality, everything's going to be on pretty much, but then your frame rate is going to suffer. So yeah, that's what that slider bar does. But I think custom and changing these individually is always best. Likewise, everyone has a different GPU with different varying powers, different rendering capabilities, and some of these settings here have a big impact on them. So let's start with sky and clouds. I don't care what the sky and clouds look like, I'm racing, so that is set to low. And believe it or not, that takes a lot of a lot out of your GPU, a lot of video memory. So I would always set that to low, even if you want everything up to high. Cars, high detail, got to be done. You've got to be having the cars in the most highest detail that you can, because that's what you're racing against. That is what you're focusing on. Pit objects, now you can have this off, low, medium. I would say this is, yet again, personal preference. If you are suffering with frame rate drop, just turn it off. It's not needed. I just like it because it's a little bit of added extra immersion. The event, now the event covers, as it says here at the bottom, it states object complexity around the track, especially in race sessions where objects are more active. Now, I actually don't know what this relates to. I'm going to guess it relates to kind of curbs, cones, braking markers. I have this on high detail. I need to go back and see specifically what that relates to, but I just have that on high detail anyway. Likewise, you could probably have that turned off or onto low. Grandstands, I like to have them on high. Crowds, low or off. I don't know, I just can't bring myself to turn this off. Even if they're low detail, I can't have empty grandstands. I like to feel people are watching me race. Objects, definitely on high detail. So this is going to be the cones and the braking markers. So I like to have these on high because they're the reference points that you're going to be using for braking and your turning points into corners. And particles, I like to have on high detail too. Now, all of this here is subject to your GPU. It's going to take a bit of playing around. Some of them are more essential than others. I think cars you definitely need on high details, but before I carry on, I have got a 2080 RTX card, so that is there's only one above that, the 2080 Ti or RTX 2080 Ti that is better than that at this moment in time. So I have got quite a beefy graphics card and CPU. I will put my specs, my PC specs, in the information below so you guys can compare. But yeah, this is going to need a bit of playing around with. All these settings are going to need a bit of playing around with to ensure that you get the right combination of maximum frames per second and a nice good quality texture, because VR is all about that level of immersion. That's why we race in VR. And we don't want the images that are displayed in front of us to be rubbish, to be out of focus, to be blurry. We want it as high detail as possible, but without sacrificing those frames per second. And finally, with this little section, I have full resolution ticked. Just ignore soft, not even worth it. Motion blur, I have this always off. Whenever I've played first-person shooter games, I've always had it ticked off. It takes a lot out of your GPU, out of your video memory, and it's just really it's off-putting. I don't like its effect at all. So I always would recommend you having that turned off. Maximum cars 63. That's pretty much because of crew chief. It has to be set to 63 to ensure that crew chief gives you the right information and to work. Frame rate. Now, I have it set to 80. Now, this needs to be set to your maximum FPS that your VR headset can do. So the HTC Vive can do 90, I believe it is, and then you've got the Vive Pro, which can do 144. The Rift S in particular, which is what I use, is 80. So I set that to 80. Now, you can turn this down below your maximum FPS that your headset's capable of if you don't want to sacrifice graphics details. In driving games in particular, I've found 60 FPS is more than sufficient. So you can turn it down to 60 FPS. It's not like shooting games where you need 144 frames to have that extra advantage, to have that added advantage. So if you're not willing to turn cars down to medium or low, and you are getting FPS drop, just turn that down to 60 60 frames per second or just above. It's more than sufficient, really. BAT 60 is the amount of frames that will run if your headset or your PC is running on battery power. That never comes into effect because, as far as I'm aware, everyone has their PC plugged into the mains and their VR. I'm not sure if that's the case if you was using a wireless VR headset, likewise the Quest. But in this sense, I'm talking about Rift S, so I leave that at 60 and it never really comes into effect. Vertical sync is turned off as that is only required for monitors. You don't need that for VR, so I have that turned off. Max pre-rendered frames is left at 1. That is the optimal setting. That is what it's generally always as the default setting, I believe, as well. As we head up, we go to anisotropic filtering. Bit of a tongue twister there for me. Now, this is, as you can see, improves texture quality when polygons are viewed edged on, such as track surfaces and the hoods of the car. So this is all kind of like sharp edges, making sure things are supposed to be rounded off and you're not seeing rectangles and triangles like the old Tomb Raider games. I have this set to 8x. Now, that is not the maximum setting, because if I turn it up to 16x, I suffer quite an FPS drop, quite a severe one, some lagging, and that is not suitable for me to record at the same time. I suppose if I wasn't recording, I could turn this up to 16x if need be, but 8x is more than sufficient. I never look at an image and go, oh, that looks like a rectangle, or that looks like a triangle. AA samples is working in correlation with anisotropic filtering. As it says, anti-aliasing typically consumes a lot of video memory, drastically reduces frame rate. Reducing this can significantly improve FPS and improve texture quality. So yeah, these two take up quite a lot of video memory. I have this set to 4x. Generally, this is always set to half of what you've got here, of what your anisotropic filtering setting is. So if it was 2, you'd have it off. If it was 16x, you'd have it on 8. I have it on 4 because I've got it on 8x, and the mode is left on 0 because that is the only mode that is available. We have render dynamic track data and render dynamic tire data, both ticked. This is, as it says, dirt, gravel, grass, marbles. I think this is essential to have these two ticked. So if you just, always leave these ticked and try and find, if you're struggling with FPS, try and find another setting somewhere else, maybe over here on the left hand side or the shadows, to make sure you can incorporate these two in. Now we move down to shadows. Now, as anyone who has played any kind of game knows, shadows have a dramatic effect on, well, they take a lot out of your GPU. I have these on tracks and cars. I have this, I think this is again, I think this is quite essential, because whenever you're following cars, you can see where their shadows are. Likewise, on the track in particular, sometimes you're using shadows on tracks as braking markers. You're not always using specific points in the ground, you're using shadows. So I think some form of shadows are essential to have on. They've got 4 options here: off, on track or cars, on everything. At a minimum, have it on track, as I've just stated, for the reasons why. Dynamic objects. This is for, likewise, other objects on the track, cones, braking markers on the side, and boarding and so forth. I don't have the filter ticked, as it says, helps anti-alias some of the jaggy edges of shadow maps, mainly noticeable in replays. I don't particularly care about the replays. It's nice to watch them back, but I don't use that so often to really care about. Night shadow maps, yes, definitely have this ticked on, because you're not always racing during the day. As I'm filming this, it's Sebring. Sebring week, and that's during the night. Sometimes you have Spa, you're racing in the night, and so forth. So yeah, that's essential to have ticked. And I also have walls and headlights ticked to ensure that, as it states, walls cast shadows, and so the headlights too. Now we have number of lights. I have this set to 3. Personally, I haven't played around with this option too much. I've kind of just left it as it is. It controls the number of lights that can cast shadows. More lights, improve visual quality at the cost of performance. So I've left this at 3. I haven't played around with the filters either. That improves the visual quality at the cost of performance. I may go away from this and play around a little bit more, but in regards to the shadows, I'm happy with how these settings display them, and I don't think I particularly need anything more from that. Dynamic cube maps I have set to 0. This renders the dynamic cars cockpit cube maps rendered per frame. I'm happy with the amount of visual quality that I've got within the cockpit and on the cars. Fixed cube maps 0. This is for the track. Likewise, I'm happy with the quality that the track is displayed at too. Shader quality I have at high. Now this is the quality of the shadows overall. I have this set to high. This is going to take a lot out of your GPU. So if you're struggling with frame rate again, turn this down to low or medium. That should help a lot. As we move over, I have the show driver arms selected. This shows the whole body of the person within the car. Makes you feel like you're within the car. You can have just the steering wheel shown, so that will remove the person within the car, and you have it hidden entirely. Personally, if you're within VR, I'd have that ticked, because that gives you some reference pointing to you being within the car and that extra added level of immersion. 2 past trees is for the rendering of the trees. I have this not ticked. Like the sky and clouds, I don't care about the trees, so I have this unticked. Just uses unnecessary video memory from your GPU. Cockpit mirrors, I have maximum of 4. It's essential that when you're in VR that you have this all ticked, because you need to be able to use your mirrors like as if you was in a normal car. If you don't have this ticked, your mirrors will not display any image, as you may see in some other videos where it's just blacked out. I have higher detail ticked in the mirrors, as well as the headlights in high detail. You can have these if you're suffering with FPS drop. Turn this to off or a lower detail. And headlights on track in mirrors too. Now I personally have the virtual mirror unticked. I don't like. Most of these cars have got suitable wing mirrors, or they've got a video display, a camera showing what's behind you, or you've got an actual rear view mirror. I like to feel like I'm actually, the whole idea of VR is that immersion, feeling like you're within the car, and I feel like a virtual mirror takes that away from you. And especially when I'm recording as well, I don't like to just be forever lifting my head up and down and looking, because it's not a good experience. So total preference to you as the driver. You can have that ticked or not, but personally I have it unticked. Onto heat haze, I have this unticked. This basically does what it says on the tin. It enables the heat haze effect, so the blurriness that you see off the track, obviously with the heat coming off of the track. I have this unticked because it just uses unnecessary video memory that could be used powering all these other settings elsewhere. Yet again, personal preference. Sharpening I have ticked. The general sharpening or the general image that is displayed within a VR headset isn't great in regards to sharpening. That's just me with the Oculus Rift S. So I'll always have this ticked just to ensure that those images are sharper than what they would be if it was unticked. HDR, now this is high dynamic range rendering. This uses a lot of video memory. So I'd only have this ticked if you've got a powerful GPU. I personally have this unticked, not because I don't have enough power for it. I have plenty of power for it. I have this unticked because when I have this on, now you can say it is a proper added level of immersion, but the sun, specifically with the new spec maps and the chrome finishes that are on cars, shines off of these and can blind you, and the sun can blind you just like you would if you was racing in real life. You can't get rid of the sun, it is there. But I've had a couple of crashes before where I've missed the corner, or I've completely missed my braking point because of the sun in my eyes. I can't see where I'm going. So I personally have this ticked off. If you don't have a beefy GPU, I'd have this off anyway because it uses a lot of video memory. Video memory swap high-res cars. Now this, as it says at the bottom, displays the three closest cars that are in front of you in a higher quality texture. So the cars that are further on down the track, you don't need to see them in a high quality. It's not really needed. Yes, you are focusing on them and what they're doing, but realistically, the cars that are kind of closest to you or directly in front of you, what you need in a higher quality detail. So I generally like to have this ticked. I think this is quite essential to have on as well. 2048 by 2048 car textures. This is just for the paints, really, kind of working in line with the video memory swap high res cars. It's just for high resolution car paint jobs. Not essential to have ticked on, as it states at the bottom. Only have this option enabled if you have a large amount of system RAM or video RAM. So if you don't have a beefy GPU, turn it off. Not essential. High car numbers, I don't need that. I don't need to see what numbers are on the cars. I've got the relative. Tick it off. Move on to FXAA, fast approximate anti-aliasing effects, and distortion, which is distortion particle effects. I have these ticked off. I don't see the benefits of them personally. Everything that I've got ticked up here or set to up here displays a good enough quality of image for me and to allow me to record at the same time. These personally just take up unnecessary video memory that I can use to ensure I'm recording a good quality image. So I'd say that's personal preference yet again, because not everyone is recording like I am. As we move down, we've got two slider bars here. I don't ever touch these. These generally are just tracking how much memory I'm using to the settings that I've got up here. They'll move up and down depending on if you've got everything set to high and low and so forth. You'll see by ticking HDR on and off, it's not moving at this moment in time, but you'll see that these move up and down, and you can see how much each setting affects or takes up how much system memory. So it's a good thing to see, because you can see what you can kind of set to high and what you can kind of set to low without having to keep going in and out of the sim and restarting the sim. And talking about restarting the sim, some effects only take effect after exiting the session. So I think HDR is one of them, where if you tick that on or you tick that off, it only updates the effect, whether you turn it on or off or not, once you've restarted the sim and come back into it. Now, I hope that's been informative enough for you guys and a good enough walkthrough. It's not just a picture of my settings. I've tried to explain it in the best detail that I can, into the knowledge that I've got. I hope you can use this as a base. Of course, everyone is going to be different, because everyone's got different specs, PC specs. Like I said, I could bump some of these up if I wasn't recording, but I want to make sure I've got that GPU memory spare so that I can record at the best quality I can. I will be following this video up with an ACC VR settings video, so that will be coming through very shortly. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, guys, for future content. I'll see you all again soon.